If I said December 7th, 1941, probably most people could say, yeah, that was Pearl Harbor Day. A terrible day, because it brought the United States into World War II. Nothing good about that. And yet, there was something maybe even worse. There was injustice because of Pearl Harbor Day. Some of you probably know it, or at least you read it in history books. The people of Japanese descent were rounded up, especially along the coast and especially on the west coast. And they were herded off to camps in the desert. And they had to give up their homes. They had to give up their businesses. All because they were of Japanese descent. If I say September 11th, 2001, everybody can probably say, yeah, the day the terrorist attacks on New York and Washington. Again, another horrible day. But there were injustices that came about because of that as well. People who were Muslim in faith, people who had Arab descent upon them. There was some discrimination going on. Some of them received death threats. Some of them were even beaten or injured in some way. And some lost their businesses due to fires or vandalism. All because they were judged by who they were or what they believed. And we say, well, injustice is part of the world. Injustice is part of life. But does it have to be that way? It must have been when I was in 5th grade, and we had heard that a new boy came into the school, 8th grader, the big kids. And it said that he was bullying people, pushing people around. So I said, in my usual good-humored tune, well, if he comes up to me, he ain't going to get away with it. I was out in the playground, and all of a sudden I went flying. Someone shoved me in the back, and away I went. And I got up, I said, this is it. It's time. And I turned around, and I said, oh, my God. This kid looked to be about that tall and about that wide. He had 2 front teeth missing. He had eyebrow that went from here all the way across to here. And he didn't talk, he growled. And I'm immediately thinking that wisdom is a better part of stupidity. I said, good morning, goodbye. I wanted revenge. I was going to show that person who was boss. And when I turned around, I realized I might be able to show that, but I'm going to pay a dear price for doing it. The story goes of a man, young man in his early 40s, was sitting home, waiting for his wife and daughter to come home. And he was worried because it was late. They had just gone about 50 miles to visit her mother, and he was getting concerned. And it got to be even later, and so he called the cell phone, and no answer. And he sat, and he thought, maybe I should go out looking for them, when there was a knock at the front door. He opened the front door, and it was a policeman. And he asked his name, and he confirmed that that's who he was. And he said, well, your wife and your daughter were in an accident, and they have been killed. You can imagine the shock of a moment like that. When he got over the shock a little bit, he asked, well, what happened? He said, well, a young man had been out drinking, drank too much, and hit him head on the highway. He asked, how's the young man? Oh, he survived a couple scratches. And he just sat there and he stewed over that for days and days and days. And the bitterness grew in him and started eating him alive. And he swore to God and to everybody else that he was going to make that young man pay. In some way, he was going to make him pay. And he got so desperate, he went out and he bought a gun. And he went to the young man's home, knocked on the door, and the young man recognized him right away and let him in. The man got inside. He pulled the gun from his pocket, pointed it at the young man, and he said, "Today you die for what you did to myself and to my wife and daughter." And the young man looked at him and said, "That's okay. I would rather die than live in the hell I've been living in since that accident." He said, "You lost a wife and you lost a daughter, and I'm so sorry for that. And you are filled with sorrow. But I am the one that took their lives. I didn't mean to, but I did. And I would rather die." And the young man raised the gun, pointed it at him, but didn't pull the trigger. He eventually put the gun back in his pocket, and they both sat down. They started sharing their feelings back and forth. And suddenly the husband recognized that this young man was feeling the same pains that he was feeling. The same guilt. And that revenge would not solve the problem. And while they didn't become lifelong friends, he walked away. But before he did, he simply said, "I forgive you," and left. Maybe that's what today's gospel is about. Turning the other cheek. But it's about forgiveness. It's about both getting forgiveness and receiving forgiveness, or giving forgiveness and receiving forgiveness. The Japanese people and the Muslims were considered enemies, and that was the justification for it. And there is so much justification. There's reasons for discrimination. There's reasons for anger. There's reasons for hatred based upon a lot of different things. We have enemies, each of us. Oh, I'm not talking about people we're at war with. I'm not talking about terrorists. Enemies, people that we do not like, people that we argue with, people that we don't get along with, people who we don't see eye to eye with. And that could be friends, it could be somebody we don't know, it could be somebody at work, it could be a family member. Today's gospel said, if that's the case, it may be time to seek reconciliation. Or if the person harmed you, it may be time to say, "I forgive you, and let's reconcile, and let's just end this." If you are the person that did the hurt, it may be time to seek out that person and say, "I am sorry. I am truly sorry for what I have done." The challenge is there. The challenge is there to be able to say or give or get reconciliation. Not seeking revenge, not seeking that living in hatred, but to forgive. That is the challenge of today's gospel.